Welcome back, dear listener, to this gentle voyage through science and story. Here, we travel at the speed of wonder, following the slow drift of starlight, the quiet stretch of roots beneath the soil, the patient unfolding of time itself. If these calm explorations speak to you, you can help keep our journey alive. A like tells the algorithm that this space matters. A comment adds your voice to the conversation. And subscribing ensures you'll always have a seat on the next voyage dot. And if you share this with someone who might need a soft place to land, you'll be planting a seed, one that might bloom in ways neither of us can yet imagine. So, settle in, let the day exhale, and together, let's begin. You begin in the stillness of a morning garden, where dew clings to leaves like dreams not yet forgotten. Every leaf, every stem, hums softly with life, a silent orchestra you've never fully noticed. Through sunlight and shadow, you start to sense the quiet presence of plant intelligence. This chapter opens the door to a world where green is more than a color. It's a living language. You open your eyes to a slow morning. The air is cool, soft against your skin, as if the world itself has exhaled overnight and is holding the breath just for you. Somewhere nearby, a bird lifts a single note into the air. Not yet a song, or like a question. You step into the garden. It is not loud here, and yet it is far from silent. The stillness hums, a low vibration that is not sound, but sensation. Dew gathers along the curve of each blade of grass, holding tiny mirrored worlds in its surface. The ground smells faintly of rain, though the sky is dry, a reminder that soil has its own way of remembering water. The leaves are not idle. They seem to be basking in something unseen, something you can feel only if you stay long enough, if you let your thoughts slow to match the rhythm. The sun hasn't risen high yet, but already its light is being caught and turned into something invisible, energy flowing into green cells, feeding something ancient and constant. You reach out to touch a leaf. It is cool, slightly textured, with the faint give of something alive. It doesn't move away, but it doesn't yield entirely either. It holds its own shape. Here in your hand is a being that does not speak with sound, that has no face to read, but still exists in its own deliberate way. Plants do not hurry. Their time is measured not in seconds, but in cycles, day into night, season into season. And yet, their stillness is not the same as inaction. Inside each cell, tiny structures called chloroplasts are at work, catching sunlight like nets catch rain, and turning it into sugars, fuel for growth, for survival. This is photosynthesis, a word you may have learned long ago, but here, it feels less like a science lesson and more like a quiet act of magic. Imagine it, light, something weightless, intangible, traveling from a star 93 million miles away, lands here in this leaf and becomes something you could taste if you wished. Sunlight turned into substance, into the building blocks of a forest, of an orchard, of every breath you take. It is the slow alchemy that makes green life possible. But there is more. These leaves, these stems, are not isolated. Through the soil, roots connect them to others nearby, sharing water, nutrients, even signals of distress. The air itself carries their messages, chemical whispers sent to warn of danger or to call in allies like bees and butterflies. Though you cannot hear them, the plants are speaking all the time. You move deeper into the garden. Here, the light filters through layers of leaves, painting the ground in shifting patterns. Some leaves turn ever so slightly toward the sun, as if tracking its slow arc. Heliotropism, scientists call it. To you, it feels like devotion, a patient reaching for what sustains them. You pause beside a small shrub. Its leaves are delicate, finely serrated, and when you brush your hand along them, you notice they tremble in the faintest breeze. But the movement is more than wind. Even without air's touch, plants move imperceptibly slowly, adjusting their angles, opening and closing pores, called stomata. Through these tiny gates, they breathe, drawing in carbon dioxide, letting out oxygen, regulating the very atmosphere that you depend on. The morning deepens. A bee lands on a nearby flower, the weight of it bending the stem just slightly. Pollen dusts its legs as it moves from bloom to bloom, unknowingly carrying the plant's future with it. The flower's bright color and faint scent are invitations written in wavelengths and molecules. You realize that each petal, each fragrance, is a carefully tuned signal in a silent conversation between species. The more you look, the less still the garden becomes. An ant navigates a stem as if it knows every bend and curve. Tiny aphids cluster in the shadow of a leaf, their presence a quiet threat. Somewhere unseen, a caterpillar chews, and the plant it feeds on begins to respond, releasing volatile chemicals that drift through the air, a call for help that might bring wasps to defend it. The drama is slow, almost invisible, but it is constant. You sit on a low bench, feeling the earth beneath your feet. In the soil below, roots are searching, pushing through dark grains of sand and clay, sensing moisture, detecting nutrients. Some reach toward distant patches of richness. Others pull back from salty or toxic ground. Each root tip is like a fingertip, tasting, feeling, deciding. And here is where the thought takes root. Plants, for all their quietness, make choices. Not in the way animals do, with brains and nerves, but through networks of cells, chemical gradients, and electrical pulses. They turn toward light or away from it. They invest in growing taller or in strengthening their roots. They store water when drought comes or shed leaves to survive the cold. It is a slow intelligence, but it is intelligence nonetheless. Begin to understand why scientists speak of plant behavior. It does not look like the movements of a bird or the decisions of a fox, but it is every bit as intricate. And the longer you sit here, the more it becomes clear that this intelligence is not just about survival. It shapes entire ecosystems, forests that make rain, grasslands that anchor soil, algae that feed the oceans. The garden has changed since you first stepped in, not because the plants have rushed to do anything, but because your own attention has deepened. You notice the faint shimmer of spider silk between two stems, the way moss catches light like velvet. You feel the cool air under the leaves compared to the warmth of the open path. You realize that even the air you breathe in this moment is enriched by the work of the green around you. Time in the garden feels different. The minutes no longer click past. Instead, there is a sense of being suspended, as if you have stepped out of the clock and into another way of keeping time. This is plant time, patient, deliberate, unhurried. A rhythm so steady, it becomes invisible to those who live too fast. And perhaps, in this moment, you feel the invitation to slow down, to notice, to let yourself be held in the same patient sunlight that touches the leaves. The morning is fully awake now. Light streams more boldly through the canopy, drawing sharp lines and shadows. Yet the hum of the garden has not grown louder. It is the same steady current you felt at dawn. You think of how easily this quiet intelligence is overlooked, passed by in a rush, dismissed as background. But when you pause long enough to listen, you find that green life is speaking all the time. You stand, taking a slow breath. Somewhere, ahead unseen, the garden's roots are reaching farther. Its leaves are turning. Its flowers are calling out to pollinators you cannot name. And you find yourself wondering, if the roots beneath your feet can sense and respond, what else might be happening in the deep dark earth that you cannot yet see? Beneath the soil, unseen roots reach like careful hands, mapping the earth in slow motion. Here, memories are stored not in brains, but in patterns of growth and response. The underground network becomes a living archive of seasons past. You begin to realize that even in darkness, plants hold stories. You kneel at the edge of the garden, hands brushing the cool surface of the soil. Above ground, the morning feels open and bright. But just beneath your fingertips lies another world. Darker, older, and far more crowded than it appears from above. The roots are there. You cannot see them, but you know they are working in silence, weaving through grains of sand, curling around pebbles, slipping into cracks that seem too narrow for life to enter. They are slow, but they are not still. Each tip moves with purpose, sensing and deciding. If you could follow one root through the earth, you might see how it changes direction when it finds a stone in its path, or how it accelerates when it touches damp soil. You might notice the fine hairs that sprout along its length, delicate extensions that increase its reach and help it drink from the hidden reservoirs underground. These are not random wanderings. They are choices shaped by memory, not memory. The way you carry it. No images, no words, no recollection of a specific day. Instead, plants remember through change. When a root encounters dryness, it shifts its growth to avoid it next time. When it finds rich soil, it expands in that direction more quickly in the future. The pattern of a plant's body becomes a record of what it has faced and what it has learned to expect. Beneath you, this living memory is not stored in one place, but spread through the entire network. A tree's oldest roots remember the years of drought and the years of plenty. The youngest roots inherit those lessons through chemical signals and structural patterns. And while each root is its own explorer, together they are part of a whole, a single organism adapting to the shape of the world it lives in. The air smells faintly of dampness, though the sun has been shining for hours. It is the scent of life that works out of sight, of fungi moving through the soil in thin, thread-like strands, of roots exchanging sugars for minerals in a trade that has been happening for over 400 million years. These fungal partners, called mycorrhizae, link one plant to another, creating a network so vast that scientists call it the Wood Wide Web. In this hidden network, plants share more than just resources. They share warnings. A tree attacked by insects and sends signals through the soil, prompting its neighbors to produce defensive chemicals before the threat arrives. A seedling shaded by taller plants can receive carbon from others through fungal threads, helping it survive until it reaches the light. It is not generosity as we know it. It is survival shaped by connection. Imagine the quiet conversation happening below your feet right now. Each signal travels slowly, not at the speed of nerves, but in the measured pace of water moving through soil. Yet in the timescale of a plant's life, it is fast enough to change the outcome of an entire season. You dig your fingers into the earth, feeling its coolness, its grains slipping between your skin. Somewhere below, a root is adjusting its direction because of the very moisture you've disturbed. Somewhere else, a signal is traveling from one plant to another, changing how that second plant will grow. Roots do more than search. They hold the shape of the past. In a forest that has seen centuries, roots still follow the lines of old riverbeds long since dried up. In deserts, roots remember where rare rains once soaked the ground. In gardens, they grow back toward the patches of earth that were rich in last year's compost. The soil is not just a place to grow. It is a map, a diary, a memory. You think about how strange it is that something without eyes, ears, or a mind can still remember. But then you realize memory is not always about thought. Sometimes it is about form. The way a coastline remembers the pull of the tide in its curves. The way a canyon remembers the flow of water in its walls. A root's shape is the memory of every obstacle it has met, every nourishment it has found, every danger it has avoided. And it is not only individual plants that remember. Ecosystems do too. Grasslands regrow faster in areas where roots have off. been cut but not destroyed, the old underground network guiding the new life. Forests that have been logged still carry the ghost of their former selves in the root systems that lie sleeping beneath the surface. Even when the visible world changes, the underground world can keep the memory alive. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the thought settle. Some memories live in photographs, in journals, in human minds. Others live in the way roots lean toward water, or in how they slow when they sense the toxins of a polluted patch of soil. The morning breeze brushes past you, carrying with it the sound of leaves shifting above. But you are thinking of what happens far below, in the dark, where no wind moves and no light falls. Down there, life is both patient and alert, waiting for signals, responding to changes, storing the shape of the past so it can guide the future. The roots do not just reach down. They also reach out. They entwine with the roots of other plants, weaving themselves into the same soil. If you could see it from above, stripped of earth, it might look like lace stretched across the ground. Every crossing point is a meeting. A place where something might be shared, passed along, remembered. And though you can't see it, the earth beneath your knees is alive with tiny pulses of electricity. Yes, roots carry electrical signals, not unlike the impulses in your own nervous system, though slower, gentler. When a root is wounded, these signals travel through the plant, changing its chemistry, its priorities, its direction. The plant doesn't think about what to do. It simply does it. That, too, is a kind of memory, the ability to respond based on what has happened before. In the deep silence of the underground, there is no rush. Some roots will live for decades, even centuries. In old trees, the oldest roots may remember a time before you were born, before the buildings nearby were raised, before the road that runs past the garden was even paved. Their memories are measured not in human years, but in the slow language of growth rings and the passing of seasons. You brush the soil from your hands and sit back. Above, the plants sway slightly, their movements shaped by wind and sun. Below, the roots continue their work, unchanged by your presence, guided by the history written in their shapes. You realize that every step you take on this earth is above, an entire world you cannot see, a library without pages, holding the unwritten stories of the land. And as you stand to leave, you feel a quiet respect for the stillness underfoot, for the patience it takes to remember without words, without pictures, without sound. It makes you wonder, if so much can be stored in the silence of the roots, what else might be hidden in the spaces between the soil and the stem? You trace the invisible exchange between air and leaf, where tiny pores breathe without lungs. Each breath is a whisper of carbon and oxygen, a quiet dance with the atmosphere. Photosynthesis unfolds like a poem written in light. In this stillness, you feel the heartbeat of the planet itself. The air is still enough that you can almost hear your own breathing. In, out, a slow rhythm, steady and familiar. And yet, all around you, there is another kind of breath, one you cannot hear, but one that shapes every breath you take. You stand beneath a canopy of leaves. Some are broad and waxy, others thin and trembling in the faintest breeze. Their surfaces shine softly in the morning light, but the real work is happening on a scale too small for you to see. Every leaf is covered in tiny pores, stomata, little doorways that open and close in response to the needs of the plant and the conditions of the air. Through these openings, carbon dioxide drifts in, drawn from the atmosphere around you. Oxygen flows out, as quietly as a sigh. Water vapor slips away, invisible yet essential, part of the plant's constant balancing act between nourishment and loss. This is the leaf's breath, not taken with lungs or muscles, but with the gentle push and pull of chemistry and physics. You could shrink yourself down and stand at the edge of a single stoma. You would see a world in motion. Gas molecules moving like travelers through a busy station, slipping past each other in both directions. Light streaming in, triggering reactions deep inside the leaf cells. Sugars forming, the plant's energy rising with the dawn. The process is called photosynthesis, a word so common it can be easy to forget its wonder. Light, water, and carbon dioxide come together to make sugars, the building blocks of life. Oxygen is the gift returned to the air. It is not only the plant's breath you are witnessing, but the planet's heartbeat. Without this quiet exchange, there would be no forests, no oceans filled with fish, no people walking the earth. Every breath you have ever taken is connected to this process, this silent miracle repeated billions of times each second across the globe. The rhythm is ancient. Long before humans arrived, before animals walked the land, before the first forests rose, photosynthesis was at work in the oceans. Tiny cyanobacteria, drifting in the currents, began capturing light and releasing oxygen. Slowly, over millions of years, they transformed the atmosphere into something breathable, shaping the conditions for all life to come. You tilt your head back, looking up at the layers of green. Sunlight filters through the leaves, softened into shifting patterns of gold and shadow. Some of that light will be absorbed, its energy stored in the bonds of sugar molecules. Some will be reflected, painting the world in shades of green. Some will pass through entirely, touching the ground to feed smaller plants below. The leaf's breath is more than exchange. It is balanced. Each stoma opens wide enough to take in carbon dioxide for photosynthesis, but not so wide that too much. Water is lost. On hot days, many will close, protecting the plant from dehydration. On cool mornings, they may open fully, drinking in the air while it is moist and gentle. It is a conversation with the weather, carried out without a single word. You reach out and hold a leaf between your fingers. Its surface is smooth, but under the skin, cells are arranged like tiny rooms, each with a specific purpose. Some capture light, packed with chlorophyll that gives the leaf its green. Others move water and nutrients. And woven through them all are pathways for gases, invisible corridors where air moves in and out, in patterns that have shaped the world's climate for eons. You take a slow breath yourself, letting it mirror the imagined rhythm of the leaf. In your lungs, oxygen moves into your blood. In the leaf, carbon dioxide moves into its cells. Two different systems, but both designed to exchange what is needed for life. It is humbling to think that you and the leaf are partners in this cycle. You give it carbon dioxide each time you exhale. It returns oxygen with every breath it takes. Neither of you could exist as you are without the other. A bird passes overhead, its wings briefly casting a shadow on the canopy. Some leaves sway gently, shifting their angles to catch the light again. This movement, phototropism, ensures the leaf receives as much sunlight as possible. It is as if the leaf is listening for the sun, turning to face the voice that feeds it. In the quiet, you begin to notice another layer to this breathing, the role it plays beyond a single plant. Forests release vast amounts of oxygen into the atmosphere, but they also take in huge quantities of carbon dioxide, storing it in trunks, branches, and roots. This is why they are called the lungs of the earth. They regulate the gases that blanket the planet, keeping the balance that makes life possible. Even oceans join this breath. Microscopic phytoplankton, floating in sunlit waters, perform photosynthesis just as leaves do. In fact, they produce more than half of the world's oxygen. So when you breathe, you are not only breathing with the forest, but with the sea. The thought settles over you like a soft blanket. Every inhale is a connection to a web of life so vast you can barely comprehend it. Every exhale is a gift returned, feeding the green and the blue alike. The science is clear and precise. But here, surrounded by leaves, it feels more like poetry, a rhythm written not in words, but in molecules. A partnership older than memory, quieter than the smallest whisper. You close your eyes and listen, though there is no sound. In your mind, you imagine the leaf's breath moving in time with yours. Two living things, two different forms of life, sharing the same air, shaping the same world that the day warms up. The light grows stronger, and the stomata open just a little, wider, ready to take in what they need. Water moves up from the roots, pulled by the evaporation from the leaves. It is a constant flow, a movement from darkness to light, from ground to sky dot, and as the leaf breathes, it is not alone. Every plant in the garden joins in, grass, flowers, trees, even the smallest moss. Together, they form an invisible chorus. Each note a molecule, each breath part of the planet's great song. You think of the air inside your lungs now. Moments ago, it may have been inside a leaf. Before that, it may have been deep in the ocean, released by a drifting plankton. The air moves freely, shared without ownership, connecting every living thing in a chain that never breaks. You open your eyes and see the sunlight catch on a cluster of leaves, lighting them from behind. Their thin skin glows softly, revealing veins that carry water and sugar like rivers. Each vein is part of the leaf's breath, moving resources to keep the process alive. You realize the breath between leaves is not just about life, it is about memory. 2. Each day's breathing shapes the growth of the plant, storing energy for the future, building wood and seed and flower. The leaf does not know tomorrow's weather, but its breath today prepares for it nonetheless. The air stirs slightly, carrying the scent of warm earth and the faint sweetness of flowers. You inhale, and for a moment, you feel as though you are breathing with the entire garden. It is not a rush, not an urgency, just a steady exchange, as old as the first green life on earth dot. And as you stand among the leaves, you find yourself wondering, if the breath of a plant can shape the air we share, what might happen when plants begin to speak to each other through that same invisible space? A forest is never silent. It hums with chemical words and electrical sighs. Plants call to each other when danger comes, sending invisible warnings through air and soil. Some messages are for friends, others for foes. Here, you learn how green life speaks without sound. You step into the forest, and at first, it feels still. The air is thick with the scent of damp earth and fallen leaves, but no voices greet you. There are no shouts, no birds calling from the canopy just now. It would be easy to believe you have wandered into a quiet, wordless place, but the stillness is a veil, and as your senses begin to soften, you realize there is a conversation happening all around you. Not in sound, but in scent. Not in language, but in molecules, drifting like invisible letters through the air. A plant is not voiceless. It speaks in chemistry. When the leaf of a young acacia is bitten by a grazing antelope, it releases a sharp burst of tannin-producing compounds into its own tissues, making the leaves less palatable. But it doesn't stop there. A chemical message, ethylene gas, floats from leaf to leaf, carried by the wind. Nearby acacias catch this message and begin changing themselves too, thickening their own defenses, preparing for teeth that may never touch them. It is a warning cry, invisible and precise, carried not in seconds of sound, but in molecules drifting over seconds, minutes, sometimes hours. And this is only one dialect. Plants have many. Beneath your feet, the roots are another kind of tongue, one that speaks slowly but reaches far. Here, messages travel through a living web of fungi, the mycorrhizal network. These fungal threads wrap themselves around roots, connecting one tree to another, sometimes linking different species. All together, sugars and nutrients move through this network. Yes, but so do warnings. A pine sensing an attack from beetles may send a quiet alarm through the fungal threads, prompting nearby trees to produce defensive chemicals in their resin. Long before the beetles arrive, to walk in a forest is to walk inside a system of constant alertness, a place where life listens, responds, and remembers. You pause beside a tall beech tree, its bark dappled with the pale lichen that grows in patient, unmoving patches. Above, the leaves tremble in the slightest wind. Somewhere unseen, the tree may be speaking to its neighbors, not only to warn them, but to share. For not all plant communication is about danger. There are messages of cooperation, too. In certain soils, one plant may be struggling for nitrogen, while another nearby has more than enough. Through the fungal network, nutrients can be sent, not taken. Some scientists call this the Wood Wide Web, a playful name for something profoundly old. It is a living economy, trading in carbon, nitrogen, and phosphorus, an exchange that benefits the health of the entire forest. The rhythm of plant communication is not like ours. You and I speak in sentences that dissolve in seconds. Plants speak in slow waves, some lasting minutes, others stretching over days. A tomato plant bitten by caterpillars will release a blend of volatile organic compounds into the air. In nearby tomato plants, this scent triggers the production of enzymes that make their leaves tougher, harder to chew. If the attack persists, the messages may change, shifting in chemical tone, signaling urgency. It is a language, but without syllables. You reach out, letting your fingertips brush the underside of a fern's frond. Its softness hides its quiet vigilance. If conditions change, too little water, too much light, the fern shifts its metabolism, and sometimes the signals it sends to the plants around it change too. These are not words as you know them, but they are instructions, warnings, reassurances. Some plants speak in colors. When a fruit ripens, it turns brighter. A silent announcement to animals, I am ready. Carry my seeds. Some flowers shift their hue after pollination, letting bees know the nectar is gone, and not to waste their visit. It is efficiency and elegance intertwined. In the desert, certain shrubs use chemical warfare, not only to warn friends, but to keep rivals away. Their roots release compounds that make it harder for other plants to sprout nearby, a kind of territorial whisper. And yet, even here, among the more selfish messages, there are moments of generosity. Under harsh conditions, some plants share water through root grafts, their tissues fusing into a shared lifeline. The forest you stand in feels different now. You imagine the air dense with invisible words, drifting and curling around you. The soil below humming softly, passing information from root to root. Every leaf is a listening ear. Scientists have even found that some plants can detect the vibrations of chewing. When a caterpillar eats a leaf, the faint sound of its jaws, vibrations smaller than you could hear, is enough to prompt a defensive. Chemical change. It is not hearing, not exactly. It is more like feeling a ripple in the air and knowing what it means. You take a slow breath, aware of the parallel between their lives and ours. We, too, send signals in ways we barely notice. A glance, a shift in tone, the way we pause before speaking. Plants have refined their quiet expressions over millions of years, weaving a language not of letters or notes, but of survival and connection. There is humility in this knowledge. When you pass a tree, you may think it stands alone, silent in the wind, but it may be speaking in a way you cannot hear, to its neighbors, to the soil, even to the insects that live in its bark. It may be part of a conversation that began long before you arrived and will continue long after you leave. You kneel, pressing your palm against the damp ground. Somewhere beneath, threads of fungus stretch toward a root, carrying sugars in one direction, and perhaps a warning in another. Above you, the leaves catch light and exhale oxygen, another form of silent conversation, one that binds you to them with every breath you take. Perhaps the most extraordinary thing is that you are part of this exchange. When you breathe out carbon dioxide, it becomes part of the air the plants draw in. When they release oxygen, it becomes part of your blood. This is not a metaphor. It is chemistry, a mutual giving and receiving that has been ongoing since the first plants rose from ancient waters. The more you listen, the more you feel it, the awareness that nothing here is truly separate. Messages pass through the air, the soil, the roots, the light itself. The forest is a body made of many bodies, each alive in its own right, yet bound together by threads of information and exchange. You stand, brushing soil from your hands, and take one last look around. There is movement here, though not the kind you can measure in seconds. It is a movement in meaning, the steady flow of understanding from one green life to another. And in this awareness, you sense a deeper question forming. If plants speak in such subtle ways, what other forms of conversation are taking place in the living world? Ones we have yet to recognize. What silent connections run between the creatures of the air, the water, the unseen realms of earth? To a plant, time is not hours or days, but the slow bending toward the sun. Flowers open, seeds fall, roots spread, all guided by an inner clock older than memory. Seasons move through them like music in a dream. You begin to see your own sense of time stretch and soften. You stand at the edge of a meadow in the first light of morning, the grass still jeweled with dew. The air is cool, and somewhere in the distance, a bird gives a solitary call as if to mark the day's beginning. But here, among the wildflowers and quiet stems, you realize something strange. This beginning is only yours. For the plants around you, time flows differently. You watch a sunflower turn its head, almost imperceptibly, toward the rising sun. It is not in a hurry. It does not need to be. The movement is measured in hours, not seconds. And yet, it is precise. The arc of its turn dictated by an inner clock, as old as the species itself. This is a circadian rhythm, but not the kind you feel when you get sleepy at night or wake at dawn. Plants, too, have these internal cycles, patterns that tell them when to open their flowers, when to fold their leaves, when to rest. Deep inside their cells, molecules shift and signals pass, marking time without a tick or a tock. Their clock is written in proteins, in the ebb and flow of chemistry, in responses to the faintest changes in light and temperature. You imagine it like music, each cell a tiny musician in an enormous orchestra, playing a piece that lasts not minutes, but seasons. Some notes are bright and urgent, the rush to bloom before a pollinator passes by. Others are slow, sustained, the gradual thickening of bark, the patient weaving of roots deeper into the soil. A breeze passes through, and the meadow ripples. You notice that each plant holds its own history of time. The oak nearby counts its years in rings, each layer of wood a record of rainfall, drought, and sunlight. A dandelion measures in weeks, turning from yellow blossom to delicate globe of seeds in what feels like a single breath. Mosses may live centuries, bending low. Against the wind, their time unfolding in near silence. To them, the year is not a calendar, but a story told by light. Days lengthen, and the plant knows to stretch upward, to unfurl new leaves. Days shorten, and it draws back, conserving its strength, retreating into roots or seeds. This is photoperiodism, the sensing of day length, guiding when flowers bloom and when leaves fall. You think of how your own life is bound by numbers and schedules, alarm clocks, deadlines, hours ticking away on glowing screens. Here, time has no such edges. A seed waits not for a date, but for the right moment, when soil is warm enough, when moisture is just so. It listens to the world, and the world tells it when. Some seeds, like those of desert plants, may wait years, even decades, for rain to arrive. Until then, they remain dormant, holding their potential like a breath held in stillness. Others, like alpine flowers, race against short summers, blooming almost as soon as snow melts, their entire lives compressed into a few frantic weeks. It makes you wonder, if you could feel time the way a plant does, what would change? Perhaps urgency would soften. Perhaps patience would take root. You kneel beside a small violet and notice the delicate way its petals curve. These petals did not appear all at once. Cells divided, stretched, and arranged themselves with quiet precision, guided by signals you cannot see. The plant was not rushing toward completion. It was simply following its rhythm, the rhythm written in its DNA, shaped by millions of years of adaptation. And that is another layer of time plants carry, evolutionary time. The clocks in their cells are tuned not just to this day or this season, but to patterns that have repeated for millennia. The sunflower's turning is the inheritance of ancestors that learned to track the sun for warmth and light. The oak's autumn shedding is a memory of countless winters survived by conserving energy. You close your eyes for a moment and listen. There is no ticking, no ringing, yet you feel the pulse of this slow time around you. The rustle of grass is not just the wind, it is the passing of days in leaf language. A scent of the meadow, faintly sweet, is not just pleasant, it is a chemical marker of growth, decay, and renewal, moving through the air in cycles older than the soil. Beneath your feet, your mind drifts to the flowering of night-blooming plants, those that keep their petals closed all day, only to open under the moon's pale light. They live by a clock set to darkness, drawing in the moths and bats that carry their pollen. You picture them as quiet night dancers, their timing precise, their purpose hidden from those who only see the daylight. Even vines have their own sense of time, coiling around a support at a pace you could watch if you had the patience to stand for hours. Some flowers turn toward the sun only in their youth and hold still as they mature, trading movement for the sturdiness of seed-bearing. You think of the giant sequoia, whose life can span thousands of years. To such a being, your entire lifetime might seem like a gust of wind. Yet to a mayfly resting briefly on a flower, a single afternoon is an age. Time, you realize, is not a single river flowing at the same speed for all. It has many rivers, winding through many landscapes, each with its own current. A butterfly drifts into view, landing on a thistle. In the seconds you watch, it sips nectar, lifts away, and disappears toward another bloom. For the plant, that fleeting visit is the moment it has been preparing for. Days or weeks of growth, culminating in a single chance to be pollinated. And then time shifts again. The flower will fade, the seeds will form, the cycle will begin anew. The sun is higher now, and the meadow's colors have changed. Shadows are shorter, the greens more vivid. You can almost feel the plants adjusting, opening further, tilting more directly toward the light. This adjustment is not random. Inside each leaf, tiny chloroplasts rearrange themselves to catch sunlight efficiently. It is a daily choreography, invisible to you unless you look for it. And yet, for all their precision, plants do not live by a rigid schedule. They allow for variation, for storms, for shade, for moments when the unexpected shifts their rhythm. This flexibility is part of their survival. A late frost, a sudden drought, a pollinator arriving earlier than usual. These can all alter the pace, and the plant will adapt. Not you realize how different this is from the way you sometimes treat time as something to be controlled, measured, squeezed. For plants, time is not a cage, but a partner. They move with it, not against it. A memory surfaces. The first time you planted a seed as a child, pressing it into the earth and checking each day for the first sign of green. It seemed to take forever, but when that green finally appeared, it felt sudden miraculous. You didn't know then that even in darkness, under soil, the seed had been alive with activity, sensing, stretching, pushing its first root downward. In search of water, you take a slow breath and feel your own heartbeat. It is fast compared to the slow pulse of a tree. But perhaps, if you listened long enough, you could find a rhythm that matched, a place where your time and plant time meet. A cloud passes over the sun, and the meadow's light shifts. Somewhere, a flower begins to close. Another prepares to open. These are small acts, but in the language of plants, they are entire chapters. And in these chapters, you begin to sense a truth. The world is not moving too fast or too slow. It is moving exactly as it should for each of its inhabitants. Perhaps that is the gift of seeing through the eyes of petals and stem, to understand that your own pace is not the only pace, and that life can be just as full in a single patient. Bloom as in a whirlwind of activity. You stay for a while longer, letting the day stretch and soften. Somewhere ahead, the plants will speak again, not with sight or motion, but with something subtler. Fragrance is more than beauty. It is a plant's way of reaching across distance. Some scents invite bees, others repel predators, all composed in nature's invisible chemistry. You follow the trails of molecules drifting on the wind. Each aroma tells a story you've never heard before. You step into the forest at first light, and the air is not just air. It is a library. Invisible books float here, bound not in paper, but in molecules, each one carrying a message. You breathe, and the stories enter you, unfolding quietly in your mind. A soft sweetness drifts from somewhere nearby, perhaps a wild honeysuckle, coaxing the morning's first bees. Sharp, peppery notes cut through from deeper in the undergrowth. A quiet warning from a plant that would rather not be touched. You realize then, the forest is speaking. Even though no sound is made, plants speak in sense. It begins deep within their green cells, where sunlight is converted into sugars, and sugars into complex, fragrant chemicals. Tiny factories, enzymes, work like patient artisans, shaping molecules with care. Some are light and airy, designed to rise quickly and travel far. Others are heavier, meant to cling close, lingering on petals or leaves like whispered secrets. Bee approaches a cluster of violet blossoms, drawn by the perfume they release at this exact hour. It is not a coincidence. The flowers have timed their scent with the bee's daily foraging rhythm, ensuring that the chemical signal meets its intended receiver at just the right moment. The bee tastes the air with tiny sensory hairs, invisible to your eye, but alive with sensitivity. It follows the gradient of smell, each wingbeat carrying it closer to its reward. For the bee, the scent is a promise. For the plant, it is a bargain, nectar in exchange for the transport of pollen. Fragrance is commerce here, but not of coins or contracts. It is a trade written in air. Not all scents invite visitors. Some are made to repel, sharp, bitter, or acrid notes that whisper danger to grazing animals or hungry insects. A wild sage releases a burst of pungent oils when its leaves are crushed, not to please you, but to make itself less appetizing. Some plants go further, producing molecules that interfere with the biology of those who would eat them, discouraging. A second bite. It is easy to imagine these defenses as passive, a fixed property of the plant's body. But many are active, responsive, even strategic. A caterpillar begins to chew on a leaf. Within moments, the plant detects changes in its chemistry, tiny molecular alarms that spread from cell to cell. In response, it starts producing a different suite of molecules, some to make the leaves taste worse, others to drift away in the air. Those drifting molecules are distress calls, traveling to neighboring plants of the same kind, warning them to prepare their defenses. In this way, a single bite can set off an invisible chain reaction across an entire meadow. The wind carries messages from plant to plant, and the meadow becomes aware of itself. Some scents are so carefully tuned that they summon predators of the plant's enemies. A maize plant under attack by caterpillars will release molecules that attract parasitic wasps insects that lay their eggs inside the caterpillars, halting their feeding. It is a chilling partnership, wrapped in a cloud of fragrance. You pause. By a patch of lavender, its purple spikes glowing in the sunlight. To you, its scent is calm, soothing, almost sleepy. To a bee, it is a navigational beacon, promising nectar-rich rewards. To a leafhopper, an insect that might harm it, it is a deterrent, a chemical fence. One aroma, many languages. If you could see the scent, the air would be alive with shapes and colors. Some molecules would move in tight spirals, others in wide, meandering arcs. Each would have its own weight, its own speed, its own way of clinging to moisture or dispersing into dryness. The patterns would shift with the hour, the temperature, the wind. You would watch morning flowers send out fast, light messengers, and evening blooms release heavier, longer-lasting notes to catch the attention of nocturnal moths. The scent of a rose, you learn, is not one molecule, but hundreds, layered like harmonies in a song. Some notes rise first, citrusy and bright, while others linger in the background, soft and warm. Change the ratio of just one component, and the entire fragrance tilts toward something new. It is chemistry as music, composed by evolution. Over millions of years, your breath becomes slower as you walk, in rhythm with the plant's own unhurried pace. Each inhalation feels like an act of listening. You realize that your sense of smell is a kind of memory. Scents can transport you to places and moments you thought forgotten. For animals, this memory is even older. Pollinators follow scents they have known since birth, as if guided by an ancestral map. Some plants have evolved to mimic the scents of others. An orchid in the tropics produces a fragrance nearly identical to the pheromone of a female bee. Drawn by instinct, the male bee attempts to mate with the flower, collecting pollen in the process. It is a deception as delicate as silk, woven from invisible threads of chemistry. And then there are plants that use scent to speak to you, or at least to creatures like you. The smell of ripe fruit is not a gift to the tree itself, but a signal to fruit-eating animals that the seeds inside are ready to be carried away. The sweetness is an invitation. Take this and carry my future with you. Even the faint rot of overripe fruit has purpose. It draws in creatures that thrive on decay, who will spread the seeds in their own way. Night falls, and the forest changes its language. Day-blooming flowers close their petals, and the air shifts to a deeper register. Night bloomers awaken, jasmine, moonflower, night-blooming cereus, each sending heavy, intoxicating notes into the darkness. Moths, with their long tongues and keen sense of smell, drift toward the source like soft shadows. For them, scent is not just guidance. It is the very map of the night. You pause again, realizing that the fragrances you notice are only a fraction of what is here. Many molecules pass through you unnoticed, too faint or too alien for your receptors. Yet other creatures detect them clearly, living in a world you can only imagine. To a moth, the night air is dense with trails. To a dog, a city street is an encyclopedia of invisible stories. The forest breathes, and you breathe with it. You begin to sense how much of life is lived in signals too small to see. You think of the ways people leave traces in the air, the warmth of bread baking, the tang of rain on stone, the faint spice of someone's skin. Perhaps without knowing, we are always speaking into the air. You sit for a while, letting the scents shift and change around you. The lavender softens into the background, replaced by the green brightness of crushed leaves. Somewhere nearby, a fig releases its sweet, musky invitation. A cedar stands silent, yet its resinous oils slowly thread themselves into the wind. This is not a silence at all. It is a language without sound, a conversation as old as green life itself. And just as you feel the weight of these invisible words, you notice something else. Not all fragrances are meant to be found. Some hide in the stillness, revealed only when the right trigger comes. The rub of a leaf, the warmth of sun after rain. A whole vocabulary waits in these hidden reserves, ready to speak when needed. You wonder how many such messages pass by you every day unnoticed. The thought lingers, opening a space in your mind, the kind that invites the next question. Within each leaf, tiny green alchemists turn light into sugar, water into life. This ancient magic feeds forests, oceans, and every living thing you know. You step inside this invisible workshop and watch the transformation unfold. The simple act of sunlight meeting leaves becomes an endless miracle. You stand at the edge of a meadow where the air feels warm with late afternoon light. The wind carries a soft rustle through the grass, and each leaf seems to turn ever so slightly toward the sun, as if listening. You know there is something happening inside them, something too small for your eyes, but vast enough to sustain entire worlds. You take a slow breath and step closer. A single leaf catches your attention. It's no larger than your hand, and yet within it, millions of green cells are working, quietly, constantly, without rest. If you could shrink yourself to the size of dust, you could walk inside Dot, and so, in your mind, you do. You imagine yourself drifting down through the green skin of the leaf, past its surface where sunlight dances like tiny sparks on a lake. Air changes. It becomes a gentle haze of golden light, scattered and softened by layers of green. This is the world of the chloroplast, the cell's emerald chamber. Here, the sun is not just warmth. It is fuel. Photons, tiny parcels of light, arrive after a journey of more than 8 minutes across the void of space. They touch the chlorophyll, the leaf's green pigment, and the moment they do, something ancient stirs. Energy leaps from the light into the leaf, a spark waking an invisible chain of events. You follow that energy deeper, watching it move like a current through the cell's hidden machinery. It flows into molecules waiting like open hands, breaking apart water drawn from the roots far below. Each drop of water is split into pieces, hydrogen and oxygen. The oxygen drifts away, a gift to the air. The hydrogen stays, bound now to the energy of the sun, ready to help build something new. This is photosynthesis, a word you've heard before. But here, it feels less like a scientific term and more like a ritual. The leaf takes sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide, the breath of animals, your own exhalations, and remakes them into sugar. Simple sugar, yes, but also possible. Every fruit, every seed, every forest you've ever known begins here. In these green-lit rooms, you notice how silent it feels. No hum of engines, no clatter of tools. Only the quiet, patient precision of molecules, meeting, parting, and meeting. Again, the leaf does not hurry. It does not matter. It simply transforms, moment by moment, as it has for over 3 billion years. And this work is not for the plant alone. Every bite of food you've ever taken, bread, apples, rice, fish, owes its energy to these green alchemists. Even meat, even the deepest sea creatures, trace their nourishment back to sunlight captured by leaves or by their ocean cousins, the phytoplankton. Without photosynthesis, there would be no forests, no animals, no you. You let that truth settle in your chest like a warm stone. It's easy to forget, living among walls and streets, that the most important work on Earth is still happening quietly in leaves and ocean blooms. It's easy to believe the world runs on engines and wires, when in truth, it runs on light and green. Some of the sugar made here will travel through the stem, feeding roots deep in the dark soil. Some will be stored for the winter, hidden in Seeds are swelling underground as tubers. Some will rise into flowers, feeding the colors and scents that call to bees. And some will be eaten, passing the leaf's captured sunlight into the body of a deer, or a bird, or you. You pause by the thought that sunlight, transformed into sugar, becomes part of you, woven into your muscles, your heartbeat, your thoughts. A memory of light, still burning softly in your cells. The chloroplasts work in a rhythm shaped by the day. When the sun is high, their activity blooms, each reaction cascading into the next. But when evening comes, they rest from the light's direct touch, shifting into a slower kind of work, storing, rearranging, preparing for dawn. They know the sun will return. They always have. Outside the leaf, the meadow moves gently in the wind. You see the same process happening everywhere, in the smallest clover leaf, in the tall grass heads nodding in the breeze, in the broad green canopy of the oak tree, at the meadow's edge. Billions of chloroplasts across the field, working, in quiet harmony. And beyond this meadow, the same work continues in the rainforests, in moss on stone, in seaweed curling in the shallows, in microscopic algae drifting under polar ice. The world's green is not just decoration, it is the beating heart of the planet. You think of the word alchemist. In old stories, alchemists sought to turn base metals into gold. But these green alchemists do something greater. They turn sunlight into life itself. No human hand has ever matched it. Even our cleverest inventions only imitate, in fragments, what a leaf does without thought or pride. Your gaze falls on the leaf again, back in your own size now, and you realize you'll never look at it the same way. It is a living workshop, a soft factory with no smoke, no waste, no noise. It runs entirely on light and air, and it has been running since long before your species walked the earth. There is a kind of humility in knowing that you are nourished every day by the work of beings that ask for nothing in return. Leaves do not send bills. They do not demand thanks. They simply turn light into life, over and over, as the seasons turn. The sun is lower now, and its rays stretch long across the meadow. The shadows deepen, and you can almost feel the leaves easing into their evening pace. The alchemists are still at work, but their light is fading, and soon the cool night will cover them. And yet, the garden will not sleep entirely. When the light fades, another kind of life awakens. Scents will drift more strongly in the night air, calling to moths and bats. Some flowers will open only under moonlight, their pale petals shining softly in the dark. You take one last slow breath of the meadow air, tinged now with the faint perfume of evening blooms. The day's work of the hidden alchemists has filled the world with food, with air, with beauty. And as the last rays slide away, you feel the subtle shift, the passing of the garden from day's green alchemy to the mysteries of the night. Air grows cooler. Shadows deepen between the stems. And somewhere beyond sight, the first notes of the night's quiet symphony begin. It is time to step gently into the dark, where a different kind of magic waits. When the sun slips away, the green world doesn't sleep the way you do. Plants adjust, release, and prepare for the dawn in quiet, measured ways. You wander through a moonlit garden and sense the steady pulse beneath the silence. Even in darkness, life stirs gently, unseen. The air is cooler now. The long fingers of daylight have let go, and in their place, the soft silver of moonlight spills quietly over the leaves. You step into the garden, and at first it seems still, a scene paused between breaths. But the longer you stand, the more you feel it, a slow, deliberate rhythm beneath the surface. You've been told that gardens sleep at night. Those plants close themselves off and wait for the morning. But this is only part of the truth. They rest, yes, but not in the awe way you do. There is no deep unconsciousness here, no drifting away from the work of life. Instead, there is a steady, measured continuation, a different chapter in the same story. Above you, a vine hangs heavy with blossoms. In daylight, its flowers are brilliant and open, faces turned toward the sun like worshippers. Now they are folded inward, petals closing in a slow embrace. This is nyctinesty, a circadian movement written into the plant's very cells. Tiny structures inside, called pulvini, control the movement by shifting water between their compartments. It is a silent hydraulic system, a nightly folding ritual as old as the plant itself. You lean closer, and the air carries a hint of perfume. The scent is stronger now than it was at noon. Some plants, you remember, release their fragrance at night, time to reach the nocturnal pollinators who wander under the stars. A moth drifts past, its wings catching the faintest silver in the yasto. Moonlight. It lands on the blossom, drawn by molecules, too small for you to see, but strong enough to guide it from far away. The garden's night shift is a quiet choreography. With photosynthesis paused until morning, the plants turn inward to focus on respiration, breaking down sugars made in the day, releasing energy to repair cells, to transport nutrients, to prepare for the work that will begin again at dawn. If you could shrink yourself down to the size of a leaf cell, you'd hear it. The soft chemical crackle of mitochondria at work, transforming stored energy into life's currency, ATP. Somewhere near the back of the garden, the tall stalks of corn stand motionless, but their roots are busy in the dark. They pull water from the soil, absorb minerals, and send them upward through xylem vessels, tiny columns where water clings to itself into the walls of its passage. This pull never truly stops, but at night, without the sun's heat drawing water out through the leaves, the system slows, becoming more about balance than urgency. You pause under an arch of climbing beans. Their leaves, too, have shifted position. Some droop gently downward, a posture thought to help them conserve moisture and reduce damage in the cool hours. Scientists believe this might also be a way to discourage nighttime herbivores by folding themselves away. The plants present less surface area for a hungry visitor to chew dot in the stillness. You notice sounds you'd missed before. The faint brush of leaves and a whisper of wind, the distant hum of crickets. And beneath it, if your ears could tune just a little lower, you might hear the subtle vibrations of plant life itself, a slow, living hum of water moving, cells dividing, signals traveling from root to leaf. You wander deeper, and the moonlight shifts the familiar into something strange. The pale blooms of the moonflower are open wide. These are night-blooming plants. Their lives are tuned to the hours most others use for rest. They exist for the creatures who navigate not by sunlight, but by scent, by the pull of pale shapes. In the dark, in the moonflower's white petals, there is a deliberate choice made by nature. Paleness reflects moonlight better, becoming a beacon in the dark for moths and bats. Further on, a row of tomato plants stands in gentle shadow. During the day, they are busy factories of photosynthesis, but tonight they exhale, releasing carbon dioxide back into the air. It's the same breath you take in reverse. You inhale oxygen, they inhale carbon dioxide. You exhale carbon dioxide, they exhale oxygen. Except in the darkness, the exchange shifts in rhythm, a quiet reminder of how deeply you are linked. You sit on a stone bench near the pond. The water's surface is still, but you know its ecosystem mirrors the one around you. Plants below the surface responding to night in their own ways. Algae slowing their light-driven work. Oxygen levels dipping just slightly in the cool darkness. The pond lily close, sealing in their tender inner parts until morning's light returns. The garden has its own circadian clock, just as you do. Inside every plant cell, genes switch on and off in a rhythm set by billions of years of rotation, between light and dark. It is a symphony played without conductor, each leaf and root keeping time with the turning earth dot, and yet not all in the garden obeys the same script. There are the rebels, plants whose flowers only open at night, leaves that unfurl under. Starlight, fragrances that wait until the air cools before slipping free. Night-blooming jasmine, evening primrose, tuberose. Each has found a way to thrive in the absence of sun. You realize that the night is not the garden's absence of activity. It is simply a different form of it. A shift in energy, in intention, in purpose. Where daylight is growth and gathering, night is repair and preparation. The air grows cooler still. Somewhere, dew is beginning to form. Droplets pulled from the air by surfaces cooled under the open sky. These beads of water will cling until the morning, feeding microbes, offering the smallest drink to a thirsty leaf edge. A small rustle catches your ear. In the shadows, a hedgehog moves among the plants, sniffing for insects. It is part of the night's web, an unspoken agreement between animal and plant. The plants feed the insects feed the hedgehog, and the hedgehog feeds the soil as it moves, disturbing and enriching it in tiny, unnoticed ways. Looking upward, you see the silhouettes of tree branches against the pale sky. Even here, where the night feels still, leaves and branches are measuring the length of darkness, the subtle cues that tell them the season is shifting. It's how a tree knows when to flower, when to drop its leaves, when to hold tight through. The frost. The garden teaches you something as you walk, that rest does not mean absence, and quiet does not mean stillness. Even now, beneath the moon and the cool air, life is moving, choosing, preparing. You pass once more beneath the vine where the moth visited earlier. Its work is done. The flower will close soon, its pollen safely transferred to the next waiting bloom. And somewhere, far beneath the soil, seeds are sleeping, not yet awake, but holding the instructions for tomorrow. The thought lingers with you. The night is full of waiting, and waiting is full of possibilities. In the unseen darkness, the shapes of what will come are already forming. A single seed holds an entire map for a future it has never seen. Inside, instructions for roots, leaves, and flowers wait patiently for the right moment. You imagine the bravery of germination, the leap into life without knowing the weather. Ahead, the future begins in the smallest, quietest places. You hold it in your palm. It doesn't move. It doesn't speak. It weighs almost nothing, yet you can feel the quiet gravity of what it carries. A seed is the smallest form of hope you can touch. It is a promise folded in on itself, wrapped in a coat no thicker than a whisper, carrying within it a story written long before you arrived. This story is not in ink, but in a language of molecules, spirals, and chemical locks, a code that waits for the right moment to open. You close your fingers around it and feel its stillness. It has no rush. It can wait for weeks, months, even centuries. Sun seeds, lotus seeds buried in dry lake beds, have waited more than 1,000 years before deciding the time was right. Inside, there is no sunlight yet, no green, just a dense arrangement of cells, holding starch for energy, tiny beginnings of leaves and roots curled into a fetal shape. It is life, paused mid-breath. You kneel in the soil and press the seed into its dark cradle. This is where it becomes invisible. From above, the earth looks unchanged, but below, the seed is listening, sensing moisture, warmth, and the faint pull of gravity. You imagine what this feels like from its perspective. For so long it has been in darkness, untouched, its metabolism slowed to almost nothing. Then, in a quiet instant, the outer shell softens. Water seeps in, swelling its cells. Enzymes awaken. Starch breaks into sugars, sugars into energy. And with that energy comes movement. The first movement is not upward toward the light, but downward. A root tip pushes into the soil, seeking stability, finding water. The seed does not chase the sky before anchoring itself. It knows the future, begins with something to hold on to. You think about how many beginnings in life are like this. We imagine the bright bloom before we remember the root. But seeds know. Without roots, there is no tomorrow. The root tip is sensitive, reading the soil like a blind hand touching the surface of an unfamiliar room. It finds pockets of air, threads itself between grains of sand, adjusts its direction when it meets a stone. At its tip, cells divide rapidly, creating a shield that protects the growing tissue. Behind it, delicate hairs extend, increasing the surface area, pulling in water and minerals, potassium for movement, calcium for structure, nitrogen for building life itself. Above, the first shoot begins to swell. It curves, drawn upward. By the light, it cannot yet see, but can sense through a plant's subtle machinery. Photoreceptors buried in the tissues, translating faint signals into direction. The shoot breaks the surface. You picture it, a fragile arc of green, still bent like a question mark, its first leaves folded in on themselves. It trembles in the wind, though it has no nerves to feel it. Yet the wind shapes it, thickening its stem, teaching it how to stand. Days pass in slow rhythm. Each new leaf is a small risk, more surface to lose water, more exposure to the sun's heat, but also more ability to gather light. The plant is constantly balancing these quiet equations, adjusting itself without thought, without a brain, yet with perfect instinct. You recall the vast variety of seeds you've seen. Some as fine as dust, like orchids, so small they must hitch a ride on a fungus to germinate, borrowing its nutrients until they can grow their own roots. Others as large as coconuts, able to float across oceans to find a shore. Some are armored, like treasure chests, needing fire or the grinding of an animal's teeth to open. Each strategy is a survival story, a solution to the same problem. How to bridge the gap between one plant and the next generation. You realize that every tree, every blade of grass, every flower you've ever seen began in this same state. Silent, invisible, and impossibly patient. Seeds are also time travelers. Some are carried on the wind for only minutes before finding a home. Others, trapped in ice or buried in desert sands, wait across human lifetimes. You imagine one resting for hundreds of years, only to awaken in a world entirely different from the one its parents knew. It does not hesitate. It simply grows. There's a kind of bravery in that, to begin without knowing the ending. You think of the seed's genetic code, coiled in its nucleus like a spiral staircase. These strands of DNA are instructions written in a 4-letter alphabet, telling it when to sprout, how tall to grow, when to bloom, how to make fruit, and when to die. But these instructions are flexible. The plant can adjust its shape, its timing, even its chemical defenses based on the conditions it finds. A sunflower in rich soil grows tall and wide. The same sunflower in poor ground stays small but still blooms. Adaptation is a quiet art, and seeds are its first apprentices. You picture the seed's transformation in seasons. Spring, the upward reach, leaves unfurling like slow fireworks. Summer, the fullness, roots deep, flowers open, the air thick, with pollinators. Autumn, the drying, the energy retreating underground into seeds for another year. Winter, the pause, the wait, the patience all over again. Every stage leads back to the seed. It is both the ending and the beginning. You brush your fingers across a patch of soil, knowing countless seeds may be beneath it. Some will sprout tomorrow. Others will never sprout at all. The garden's future is hidden under your hand, shaped by rain, sun, and chance. You remember that seeds are not only physical things. Ideas are seeds. Dreams are seeds. The smallest action, planted in the right moment, can grow into something you cannot yet imagine. The wind picks up, scattering dry husks across the path. Some land in the grass, some in the cracks of a stone wall, some on bare earth. Each will try. You watch one spiraling in the air, its thin wing catching the light before it disappears into the undergrowth. You will never know if it grows, but you know it carries the possibility. And possibility is its own kind of beauty. The seed you planted earlier is still below, busy in the darkness. It doesn't rush. It doesn't worry about the storms that might come. It simply grows toward tomorrow. And as you stand there, you wonder, if such a small thing can hold an entire future, then perhaps the world is filled with beginnings you haven't yet noticed. You return to the human world with new eyes, carrying the green wisdom you've gathered. Plants are no longer background scenery. They are companions in the shared breath of life. You feel the threads connecting your body to theirs root, to sky, leaf to lung. The story closes softly, but the conversation never truly ends. The garden gate closes softly behind you, though the sound feels less like an ending and more like a long, slow exhale. You step onto a path you've walked countless times, yet the world seems fractionally tilted, not in a dizzying way, but in a way that makes you notice the spaces between things. The way the air moves differently around a tree trunk, the way shadows breathe in and out with the wind, the way light clings to the edges of leaves before letting go. You've just returned from days, or perhaps hours, it's hard to tell, among the silent teachers of the green world. And now you can't unhear their voices. The first thing you notice is the smell, faint, earthy, almost shy. Soil holds its own memory, a record of rain and roots and seasons layered one atop another. Every step releases invisible molecules into the air, and with each breath, you take them in. This is not just a poetic notion. The soil really does carry chemical whispers, molecules released by bacteria and fungi that can trigger your brain to feel calm, even content. Scientists call it geosmin. You simply call it home. You pause at the base of a familiar oak. You've passed it hundreds of times, maybe thousands, but today you see it differently. Its bark, textured like ancient maps, runs in deep ridges and valleys, places where beetles once wandered, where moss claimed small kingdoms, where raindrops slit and slid toward the roots. Inside its trunk, water rises in silence, pulled upward by nothing more than the invisible force of cohesion between molecules. Billions of tiny water columns stretching from soil to sky. Your own body does something similar, blood carried by pulse and pressure through a branching system of veins and arteries. In a quiet way, you and the oak are both towers filled with moving rivers. Further down the path, a patch of grass bends in the light wind. Each blade is a factory, not of machines and noise, but of sunlight, water, and air woven into sugar. In photosynthesis, light becomes life. It is one of the simplest, most astonishing exchanges in the universe. A green alchemy that feeds every heartbeat, including yours. You realize you are breathing differently now. You are aware that every inhale brings in oxygen that was once deep in the green tissue of a leaf. Every exhale carries out carbon dioxide that may one day become part of a seedling's first breath. You are not just in the garden, you are inside an endless cycle. This realization is quiet, but it lingers. It makes the ordinary extraordinary. You notice how the plants around you don't move in haste. Even those that grow quickly by plant standards are slow to human eyes. But that slowness is not a weakness. It is patience, endurance, a strategy, written in chlorophyll and cellulose long before you arrived. Scientists have found that plants respond to touch, to gravity, to light, to the pull of water in the soil. Roots navigate toward nutrient-rich zones. Leaves angle themselves to catch the perfect arc of the sun. None of it is random. None of it is guesswork. Yet they do it without hurry. You feel a tug in your own chest, an invitation to slow down. To align with that rhythm, you take the invitation. Beneath a canopy of silver-green leaves, you sit. The ground is cool. Ants travel their invisible highways past your shoes. A bee hums, dipping from flower to flower, tracing a map it knows not by sight, but by scent and magnetic field. Somewhere inside that bee, tiny hairs sense the planets. Pull, guiding it home. And suddenly, you see your own life reflected in these quiet systems. You have your own forms of magnetism, your own pulls toward people, places, ideas. The invisible threads that guide you are not so different from the Yazan, ones that lead a bee back to its hive, or a root down toward water. A breeze arrives, carrying the smell of crushed rosemary from a nearby pot. You lean toward it without thinking. Your skin tingles. Somewhere in your nervous system, olfactory receptors translate molecules into memory. This is how plants speak in scent. Volatile oils drifting invisibly, touching the brain in ways words cannot. You think of the rosemary plant itself, standing there in its terracotta home. It cannot walk toward the sun or away from harm, so it defends itself with chemistry, producing compounds that deter pests, shield against UV, and, incidentally, flavor your meals. You realize that every plant is a quiet chemist, crafting complex molecules that solve problems before they happen. Your mind drifts back to all the times you've passed this garden without truly seeing it. How much of life is like that? Background. Scenery you forget to notice until you slow down enough to listen. The sunlight shifts, sliding down the trunks, laying gold on the leaves. You remember something from a book. That light from the sun takes just over 8 minutes to reach Earth. The warmth you feel now left the sun's surface while you were busy doing something else entirely. And yet, here it is right on time, finding you under the leaves. Time in the garden feels different. Not gone, but stretched. A minute becomes a small eternity if you fill it with noticing. And the more you notice, the more you understand that your place among the leaves is not separate. When you walk, your feet press seeds into the soil. When you breathe, you exchange invisible gifts with the green world. When you eat, you are taking sunlight stored in plant tissue, passing it through the circuitry of your own cells. There is no you and them. There is only us. You think of the forests you've never walked in, the deserts you've never crossed, the alpine meadows you've never breathed in. And yet they are part of you too, for air moves freely, and the oxygen from a far-off forest may one day find its way into your lungs. It's humbling. It's comforting. Somewhere, a blackbird calls, not a loud, urgent cry, but a patient one, shaped by instinct and practice. You imagine the bird's voice, carrying seeds from berry to branch, just as your words, your choices, carry seeds into the world. You look at your hands. Skin, sinew, bone, made from elements that were once scattered across the planet, perhaps even across the stars. Calcium from ancient seas, carbon from long-dead plants, iron forged in the heart of a supernova, all gathered here, in this moment, in this garden. The wind shifts again. You stand. The leaves above you shiver in unison, as though acknowledging your part in their story. You walk on, not toward an ending, but toward a deeper beginning, carrying the quiet certainty that your place among the leaves is permanent, whether or not you are here to see them, because you carry them with you, in your breath, in your food, in your thoughts, in your very cells. And as the path curves back toward the gate, you know you will pass through it, not as someone leaving, but as someone arriving every single time.